half the defensive starters to start the year are on the IR, which is insane to think about. But they've been able to overcome. Man, do they have enough in the tank? Obviously, there were some corresponding moves, and I know we got a couple segments of this stuff. But do you believe they have enough?
Well, until they prove otherwise, I do believe they have enough. However, the one thing that I do have to highlight is that IR list is looking a little bit longer than we certainly would like. JB, I sent something out. I don't know if you got it or not. It was a little bit late. If I didn't get it to you in time, it's my fault.
Give me 1 sec. I will grab it.
Yeah, send it to I've seen it.
I appreciate that. But the reality is that you don't want to see Malcolm Rodriguez go down. You don't want to see Mekhi Wingo go down. I'll start with Mekhi Wingo because I think that was the one that is definitely the lesser impact one. I mean, Mekhi Wingo has basically played more or less like a rotational defensive tackle, as you would expect from a later round pick. I actually think he's probably outperformed his draft stock, but he hasn't been a world beater or anything. It's just as this defensive line has continued, and the defensive line hasn't even taken on as much, but as they've taken on whatever injuries they've taken on, it's been Mekhi Wingo who's gotten a lot of the snaps, and I think for the most part, he's been fine, but nothing special. And yes, this is the notable Lions players on IR right now. And as you can see, it's a long one. Khalif Raymond, Aiden Hutchinson, Kyle Pecco, Mekhi Wingo, John Kaminsky, Derek Barnes, Jalen Reeves-Maben, Alex Anzalone, Malcolm Rodriguez, Ennis Rakestraw, and Ife Melifonwu.
Hey, add Patrick Kane to that. Retroactive to November 23rd. They just Red Wings placed him on the IR.
Oh, man.
Golly.
Well, and speaking of it,
just to let you know,
that's a team that might be going this way. The Lions certainly are. But if you want some good news about this is that John Kaminsky and Ife Melifonwu have not played a single snap this whole year, and the Lions are 11-1. You'd like to have them, but I'm not going to act like those are the worst injuries in the world. The Malcolm Rodriguez one, though, is interesting to me because, and I'll get this out of the way, and this is the last time I'm going to do it. I know that I had a few spats last year with some of the Malcolm Rodriguez fanboys. You guys were right. I was wrong. He comes back. He comes in this year when he's asked to step up and be a starter and asked to step up and play extra snaps when guys like Derek Barnes goes down and Alex Anzalone goes down. All he's done is play the best football of his life. Just when you look at PFF rankings, I don't know how much you guys look into PFF. He is the 14th ranked linebacker in the entire bleeping NFL. Higher than Alex Anzalone. Not saying he's better. It's just to put things into perspective. He's got a couple of sacks. I believe he's 6th on the team in tackles despite not playing as many snaps as the other guys. And he has been the epitome to me of next man up. This team would not be where they were at. They'd still be a playoff team. They'd still maybe lead the division, but they would not be an 11-1 team without Malcolm Rodriguez stepping up. So that is certainly going to be the one that the Lions are going to miss. The Mekhi Wingo one, as long as Levi O and DJ Reader and Aleem McNeil stay healthy, and that's a big if, by the way, I think they'll be fine. But the Malcolm Rodriguez one, that one might be tough. Yeah. But until they lose, until you see it on the field that these injuries piling up hurts them, I'm not going to waver in my confidence.
Me neither. And honestly, that was something that started for me going back to last season, seeing how Aaron Glenn was getting a lot more out of this team, especially with that kind of banged up secondary in the second half of the season out of that defense than I expected. And it was all of the schemes that he was able to do. Now we got him a little bit more talent this year, and I believe he's gotten better. Not just he as a coordinator, but adding Terrell Williams, I believe, has this defensive line. These guys are playing all just a little bit better. Some of the stuff we wanted to see out of even some of our linebackers and the guys that are going to be getting after the quarterback, regardless of if they're playing from that linebacker position or right up on the line, we've seen those guys all take steps forward. And I do believe that the coaching this year has had this team in a position to bolster our confidence. We've seen them every single time something's supposed to hold the Detroit Lions down. We see the Detroit Lions overcome that, and what are we saying after? Man, what a masterful game plan. Or we see our big dog step up and are the reasons for the interceptions. That, to me, is what was really impressive, honestly, about the Bears game. I'm looking at what happens when all breaks down that you're used to. Can you slug it out? And we saw our squad, when it comes down to just playing gritty ball, they did that. You know, when you're talking about Malcolm Rodriguez, though, that was a player that was all over the field for the Detroit Lions, whether it was dropping back in coverage, whether it was surveying, whether it was getting after the quarterback, whether it was trying to play in the run, and he was tackling well. He was getting in the backfield and getting a couple quarterback hits, and it's just like, you know what, to lose a player like that at this juncture, it compounded at that linebacker position with the fact that you also lose Alex Anzalone. That's steep. That's really steep, man.
Yeah, no Alex Anzalone, no Derek Barnes, no Jalen Reeves, no Jalen Reeves-Maybin.
What's happening to my linebackers,
well, and somebody, man? Yeah, what's happening to your linebackers? And somebody in the chat, I missed it, but he mentioned I forgot about Marcus Davenport. Add another name to the IR. But again, Marcus Davenport is one of those guys, along with a Derek Barnes, and this is no disrespect to them. You've gotten through the majority of the season without them anyway. You've gotten through the whole season without John Kaminsky and Ife Melifonwu anyway, because of other guys stepping up, like Kirby Joseph and Brian Branch taking their game to another stratosphere, and even the D-line, at least the core of the interior D-line being relatively healthy relative to the rest of the positions on the team. So you've been able to withstand that. You've been able to withstand Aiden freaking Hutchinson for more than half of the season.
That's crazy.
So by that logic, like I said, I think that they'll be fine. But Malcolm Rodriguez, man, he played at a level that I didn't even think he was capable of. And it was when his team needed him most. On a personal level, as a friend of the show, as somebody who the Woodward heavyweights discovered before anybody else did, I feel bad for him.
Yeah,
I feel awful for him.
Awful, man, because it's some of those players that you're around. All of them are generally good people that we've met. All the ones that we've met have been really good people. I can't even say general; they all have been. And his spirit is one of the ones like Lomas Brown's that just sticks out, man.
Yeah.
It just does. And so to see this happen to him, to know that this was a guy that first year in, you know what? The opportunities slated his way. And when the opportunities as the team got more talented did not go his way, he still worked, bro. And then when he got the opportunity this year to step up, he did that. Not just filled in to the necessary, backup role, but he looked like a guy who was like, you know what? We need to make sure he's consistently in the rotation. So to see Malcolm Rodriguez go down, that one was a tough one, man. Obviously, he's popped up just a couple times at the Feldman shows and such. He gave the heavies a lot of attention early on, as they gave him attention too. So it's like, that's tough, man.
Oh yeah, from the very beginning,
that's
like it was just like Malcolm Rodriguez is gonna be really step in and make plays, and he was a 6th-round pick. That's what the heavyweights were saying, and even I was just kind of like, okay, you guys are
nasty. He was as a hitter too.
He was nasty as a hitter, and the thing I like too about him, because my feeling about Malcolm Rodriguez has skyrocketed this year. I've gained more respect for him than I've ever had. Not that I disrespected him. Some people think I did. I certainly don't think I did, but Malcolm Rodriguez, when you go back to the trajectory of him as a Lion, he came in as a rookie 6th-round pick and had a really good rookie year as a starter.
Yep.
But then in that draft, that 2023 draft, what do the Lions do? They draft Jack Campbell. And then that pretty much relegates Malcolm Rodriguez to mostly the bench, at least defensively, even though he got some time at fullback and he was obviously really good on special teams. But in the NFC Championship game, he got an interception. And then this year, when you saw Derek Barnes go down first and then Alex Anzalone go down later, it was Malcolm Rodriguez who stepped up. And to me, is the number one player on the Lions in terms of epitomizing next man up. It's Malcolm Rodriguez, and he's in a class by himself in terms of next man up, stepping up, elevating your game, and keeping this defense humming when you think all of these injuries are eventually going to take their toll. And now he's the one that has to have somebody step up in his absence. It's a shame that it's like that way. It's kind of the circle of life of the NFL, though.
You know what? Let's get into some of the ways that the Detroit Lions have tried to rectify some of these injuries. With a couple players, man. Jamal Adams, galloping Lake Six says Barnes showed improvement too. Derek Barnes, linebackers. All the linebackers showed great improvement. Now I see why they chose not to go with an addition there during the offseason, because every man that steps up just keeps balling out. I don't know, obviously now they have to go to a position where they're supplementing that position, because they've just lost too much there. They have lost way too much. And some of that help we're hoping comes in the form of one, Jamal Adams, as well as Quan Alexander. These are 2 former Pro Bowlers. Jamal Adams is one I am really, really excited about. I love seeing him play, especially on the Seattle teams. And it's just like, you know what? If you can get any aspect of what he was getting after the quarterback, kind of playing mean, playing nasty, being a heavy hitter, this is something that I mean, where are you going to go at this juncture right now? It's not like you have the trade deadline to pull on. This is one in which I think Brad Holmes is cooking up. And I need you guys, my ball knowers, to let me know if I'm wrong.
I think you're right. And first off, I want to talk philosophically, because a lot of teams would let injuries really derail them, but most teams aren't built like the Detroit Lions. And it's not just that they've had to go next man up, it's that you need to eventually go from not just go from within the organization, but seek out other players. They did that with Zadarius Smith, they did that with David Long, and now they're doing it with Quan Alexander and Jamal Adams. I absolutely love to see it. And when we're talking about just the trio overall, I'm excluding Zadarius Smith because obviously he's better than all of those guys, but David Long, Quan Alexander, and Jamal Adams, I have a sneaking suspicion that one of them is really going to pop. Not all of them will, obviously, but one of them is really going to pop. We've already seen David Long on the field, and I think he's been okay-ish, but he's had snaps on a team that allowed 6 points to Indianapolis and 20 to Chicago. So he has been impactful, even if he hasn't necessarily been anything special. But right now, I want to start with Quan Alexander because he's the one to me that represents more of a glaring need. I got to start out with the fact that he was a Pro Bowler in 2017. In 2016, he was actually better than he was in 2017. His best year, he had 145 tackles, 3 sacks, 12 tackles for loss, and 1 pick six. He had a trajectory that looked like he was going to be one of the better linebackers in the NFL, and like too many players before him, injuries took its toll. He lost out on a couple of seasons, and ever since then, he's never been the same. His last full season was 2022 with the Jets. He wasn't the same player as he was in his prime. All of his numbers went down. All of his metrics pretty much went down. He was just a run-of-the-mill linebacker. But right now, even if you could capture some of what he was in 2022 with this team and with this defensive scheme and with Aaron Glenn and with Kelvin Shepard, maybe even squeeze the most you've got out of him since his prime years, I think it was definitely worth taking a swing because he is still only 30 years old, and he is one of those complete linebackers. And even in his last fully healthy year, which wasn't his best, in coverage, he allowed less than 100 passer rating when targeted, which isn't great, but that's not egregious or anything. That's about what Malcolm Rodriguez was doing.
I was going to say, like, come on now. Looking at where we are right now, to be able to get this type of help at this juncture of the season, understanding what the expectations are, that's where I'm just like, these moves to me, I'm just like, okay, cool. Because I didn't know where we were going to cook up. I didn't know what they were going to do. I was like, do we have anybody else we could pull from our own practice squad? And even some of those players got hurt.
They already on the field.
They already on the field.
Ain't no practice squad.
Michael Danye, I see you in the chat, my brother. Michael Danye says, did y'all hear Jamal Adams call us an elite organization? Man, this is crazy. I got it right here. I pulled it up. I was going to read it.
Yeah.
To get that call from a first-class organization like the Detroit Lions, it's a no-brainer for me. That's Jamal Adams was signing with the Lions. That's crazy because this thing happened like that. In 3 seasons, 3.5 short seasons, man, the way that they've just flipped things to the point that now when we do find ourselves at these junctures, because I'm sitting here like, man, how do we find ourselves being able to get a player of that caliber? They usually go to the Super Bowl expecting teams. It's like we're that team now. We're that squad. And it's like if Brad Holmes, if they're building for long term, this is the savant part of it. This is the part where it's like, yo, these guys, they're calling their shots, not just because they want to, not just because they have a hunch, but because they know exactly what they're doing. I believe all along that they understood the types of players that could be available to them after the trade deadline.
Yes, and Jamal Adams, we touched on it briefly yesterday, how he's not brought in to be a ball hawk. Hell, he might not even be brought in to be a traditional safety. He might be brought in more to just be in the box, defend the run, blitz, do a lot of what he does best. But Jamal Adams, you can't help but be intrigued because, first of all, he's only 29 years old. And for the record, Quan Alexander is only 30 as well. But Jamal Adams, when he was in his prime, he looked like he was in that one of the best safeties of all time trajectory. He was an absolute demon with the Jets, and even the first year he got traded to Seattle. In his first year with Seattle in 2020, he had 9.5 sacks from the safety position. Obviously, we're not expecting him to be that because just like Quan Alexander, even at a more glaring degree than Quan Alexander, injuries really his body betrayed him in a lot of ways, and he's not going to be the same player that he ever was. But I also think there's a chance that he's reinvigorated by playing with a great organization, because how many times did you see him on those awful, morbid Jets teams just be their best player and go home with the L, make some of the most game impacting plays, but they would take the L in those games. I think at this point in his career, knowing that he's not the athlete that he once was, to be a part of a Super Bowl caliber organization, I think that's got to be intriguing for him. And he sounded like it was basically like Christmas morning when he got that call, and you love to see it.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, the Lions have to get creative with what they're doing, because you keep losing men, and, you know, as confident as I want to be in the Lions, we got to face reality. You can't continue to, you know, endure these type of injuries and expect to just this train to keep rolling. But I like the signings. I like what you were able to get on the market at this stage in the season. These are two men that were at the top of their sport at their respective positions at one point in their careers. And I mean, the Jamal Adams one, like you said, is really intriguing, because we technically are good in our safety room. We don't really have a lot going on there. Well, we don't have a lot of extra room, you know, for anybody else there. But they're going to get creative in how they're going to use him. This guy was one of the best blitzers in the NFL. So I think if you use him as maybe like an off-ball linebacker, put him in the box, see what he has, I think he can benefit this team well. And he will also play spot duty at safety, you know, when Brian Branch or Kirby Joseph needs a break. Like he said with Quan Alexander, man, I look forward to what he's going to do in the run game. He's always been great in the run game. I mean, passing coverage is a little yet to be desired, but this is a team effort at this point. Everybody has to pitch in. Everybody has to step up. And do I think these guys will be like, you know, back to their former selves? No, but they'll come in and help this team compete. Otherwise, they won't see the field. Dan Campbell even said as much. Whoever can help us win right now is going to be out on that field. So these are two veteran guys. They can help your younger guys that are on this defense, and I expect them to fit in quite nicely like David Long Jr. has. So,
and I appreciate that from Dan Campbell, because we've seen guys who maybe if they were doing an aspect of, hey, we have to go out there and get the experience, rather than, hey, this is a pit style. Who comes out of this thing is the one who's going to be starting. We've seen some guys step up that we might not have ever gotten to see get that look. So it's awesome that they do that, but I'm also glad, like, when they were able to hold Z out, you know what I'm saying, and let the guys go in there and take over for a week. And we got the dub. And then Zadarius Smith steps in, which is somebody that I'm very, very happy that they got Zadarius Smith, because when you talk about having a Zadarius Smith to help shore up that defensive line alongside having the elite, the best safeties in the league behind you, that's where I am a lot more comfortable with some of the moves that they're making in between those two units, because it's going to help guys like Jamal Adams ultimately when you're talking about getting after the quarterback. And for me, I'm glad that Brian Branch got the experience he got last year, kind of playing all over the field rather than just at the safeties position. So that as we get deeper in the season and we know that Aaron Glenn is going to have to, like KG said, get a little bit more creative and scheme up, I believe that he has the necessary tools right now. And when you talk about Quan Alexander and you're talking about Jamal Adams, the thing that I am really, really kind of excited about the most is the fact that they're not just bringing like this kind of experience, but they're, in my opinion, bringing the ability to still play at a pretty decent level of football. Obviously, that is to be seen. But I'm pretty excited about where these guys can help the Lions get at this juncture. You know, obviously, losing Hutch and losing all the players we have, that's not the way you want to go. But in terms of being able to at least get something to fortify or stop some of the just injury aspect or slide or effect, I like these moves.
Well, they're giving themselves multiple shots, as I said, at somebody really popping off. And then I believe, too, that all three of them will have at least some impact on the season. And I'm counting David Long in that as well. And Jeff Reviews has a comment. He will have, and I think he's talking about Jamal Adams, he will have his biggest impact against Josh Allen. Just watch. And those are the type of games, those are the type of quarterbacks that you're going to have to face both in the regular season and in the playoffs. That's why you bring in guys like Quan Alexander and Jamal Adams for these to make up for the lost production of what you're going to miss. You've already seen it with Zadarius Smith and the impact that he has made. We knew as Lions fans that, and I got to give them credit, they withstood it a lot better in the moment between Aiden Hutchinson got injured and Zadarius Smith played than I thought that they would. That's on me for thinking that they might drop off a bit. They certainly didn't. But eventually you knew you were going to need a Zadarius Smith. And we know, like, that's where, to circle it back to Zadarius Smith and even some of the other acquisitions, I'm really interested to see how they play both this week and in the game against Buffalo, because those are some tough matchups. And I think that's where Zadarius Smith is certainly going to have a big impact. And it's to be seen on Quan Alexander and Jamal Adams because they just got here. But that's what you're going to need him for, the playoffs. And then as the season goes on, guys like Alex Anzalone are going to come back. Maybe Derek Barnes, maybe Aiden Hutchinson for the Super Bowl. We shall see. Jalen Reeves-Maybin. Then you may have a situation where you have almost an embarrassment of riches, which is really, really intriguing to think about.
I handled the business this year, but golly, how next season looks. Stephen Baffy, guys, and we'll get into the next segment. I'm just going to tee this up, though. Guys, the reality is that the Lions' defense in its current state is still better than the one that played in the NFC Championship game last year.
100%. 100%.